Does my hair look alright? Who's handling the Fisher account? So, what an interesting take on consumerism and capitalist culture. American Psycho is a book which is, above all else, a warning and an observation on the unfortunate state that Bret Easton Ellis was seeing and living in the early 90s and late 80s. I think that as a dark comedy it is incredible because it highlights all the things that we are aware of, and it lands with the modern reader. The constant references of brand names and products that we are familiar with, Rolexes and Evian water and other stupid things, reinforce the world that we know in our heads. And for better or for worse, we see dozens of faceless and nameless businessmen concerned with nothing more than where they're going to dinner. The bickering back and forth on where the reservations will be made, the strange interjections of entire chapters devoted to analyses of pop albums, and Patrick Bateman's slow mental delusion all make up American Psycho. And I dressed the part in the same way that I suppose Bateman would approve. I don't know, honestly. There are too many rules to dressing properly, and they're all discussed here. I love that chapters end in the middle of sentences. I love that over time things become more and more grand in the darkest and most twisted of ways, but we as the readers are still left to determine whether or not Bateman is telling the truth. And in fact we don't know, because he is an unreliable narrator in a unique way, in the unique way that you would expect a person wholly absorbed by capitalism that views everything as something they want to hold or to own. The idea of owning a tanning bed in your home just for the sake of owning a tanning bed, because Bateman constantly gets comments on his tan, is hilarious. He doesn't need one, he doesn't want one, but he only wants one after he hears that one of his friends owns one. I think that you can laugh along with this book, but you can also see the dangers, the things that upset Easton Ellis as he was becoming a famous writer again in the late 80s. And in New York, the largest of cities in the United States, it's, I'm sure, more and prevalent than anywhere else. Because it is terrifying, but it is terrifying in all the right ways. I think that it takes a special kind of comic novel for me to want to read on and appreciate it. I'm not a particularly funny guy. I think I have a rather dry sense of humor that doesn't land on most people. But with the right type of comic novel, I can almost nod along. Something like, yep, I've seen that, and that causes me to laugh. The hilarity in the familiar world here is true. I talked a lot about that I talked a lot about a similar idea in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which is a 1920s comic novel, and I talked about it in a video of underrated classics. And I think that in many ways it's the same here, that the points are sad or angry or twisted, but they're funny because I understand exactly what the author is trying to say. Or at least my interpretation of what they're trying to say. But either way, the fact that I noticed something that I don't feel like most people notice, but then it's written down right here, is what makes me laugh. I love that the businessmen are nameless and faceless, as I said, but in truth they are. They have no discrete name. They're constantly confused for one another, and their significant others are mixed up, and Bateman and many others are easily swappable. And it is only Bateman's strange behaviors that set him apart that we see. But even his admittance to murder and all of his horrible crimes are ignored, because you cannot do that. That is not part of the script. And so you are lying, you are funny, and that is it. Your hysterical breakdowns are no more than an indicator that you need to take some time off, right? I loved it. It hit home, and it was hilarious. It was true, and to a reader of today, all of the references feel fresh and new enough that I can appreciate them. Though some are a bit dated, they are not so out of date that I do not understand them. So it is a great time to read this book, I think, as I am becoming an adult and being exposed to all of the things that perhaps the world doesn't want you to see, but that you experience naturally, or that the world wants you to see but ignore. as everyone else seems to do, and this drives Bateman crazy. The craziness of being alive. And I think that anyone who can recognize that, even if they may perhaps be a unstable murderer, is valuable and can teach you lessons. And the breakdown of Bateman is this book. And Bateman is most certainly written from Easton Ellis's own experience. And I'm sure that more than he wants to admit, he can see himself in the character of Bateman as a young adult also growing up in the very world that he's writing about. It's true, it's dark, it's scary, it's full of gentleman etiquette and, as I said, dinner reservations. It's wacky and zany, full of cutting-edge technology, at least for 1991, cellular telephones and call waiting, a secretary that is attracted to their boss, and many other things that are cliché but funny in that way. And it's twisted and it's dark, and I loved it. I loved I loved everything about it. So I think that American Psycho is worth reading because it speaks the truth in its twisted and inherently false ways of the unreliable narrator, Patrick Bateman. But if you'll excuse me, I need to return some videotapes. So, I'll see you around.